This is an exclusive for Patreon video, and we're gonna talk about Captain Cash. This was suggested on the I got a message from somebody requesting this case, and I read it in the second chapter of a book that I'm reading, and I thought it'd be fitting to share with you and kind of get to that requested case. Now, in the late 1990s, London had a very prominent drug trade, and Ken Avery, he was kind of your top dog dealer who was at the time living what they called the high life. He always would dress like a businessman. He was making money, and he always kind of dressed the part and carried a briefcase full of cash with him. That is why he kind of got the nickname of Captain Cash. Now our friend Ken had been smuggling drugs, selling fake passports, and laundering money on a big scale. In the year 1996, he was involved in this huge, huge operation, illegal operation, where they were planning to smuggle 40 million pounds worth of marijuana into the UK by submarine. They wanted to use a submarine for it. Now our friend Ken, very true to his name, was also kind of a ladies' man. He would kind of buy their love by buying gifts, expensive gifts, and things for his girls. There was this one lady who got a new car because her car was not able to be repaired. When he met London socialite Belinda Brown, he instantly not only was attracted to her, but it was something deeper. Now, Belinda was the personal assistant of Bob Geldof's wife, Paula Yates, and was involved in the London drug scene as well. She had previously been arrested with the trunk of her car full of cocaine. Ken tried hard to impress Belinda. He wanted to take her on a private helicopter to the Monaco Grand Prix, but she really didn't need to be impressed. So she declined was running a bonded warehouse in London, which was the perfect setting for his smuggling business. But on June 17, 1998, his extravagant lifestyle came to an end when he was caught with 25 kilos of heroin and led police on a high-speed pursuit. He was facing over 20 years in prison, but police offered him a deal. They said they would reduce his sentence to 8 years if he helped put away higher level drug dealers he worked with. And he took it. He took the deal, and his testimony helped put away 12 criminals in a cocaine ring with a business estimated to be worth over £2 billion. At his sentencing, the judge said, quote, "As a result of your cooperation, you will never again be trusted by your former colleagues, so you can't go back to a life of crime. Those who turn against former associates should receive a very great reduction in their sentence." During Ken's incarceration, one of his cellmates said, quote, "He knew there were contracts on his life, but he didn't seem to care. His attitude was, 'Come on, then let's get over with.' There was no way he was going to live quietly. Believe me, when he goes, he will go out with a bang." End quote. Avery was sentenced to 8 years but only served 3 and was released in the year 2002. After his release, he had no money and almost no friends. He changed his name from Ken Avery to Ken Reagan and moved in with his father into a tiny 1-bedroom bungalow. In July of 2002, Ken Reagan, our friend Ken, was looking for a way to create his next fortune when he came across a company based at Heathrow Airport called Siva Freight. And this company was owned by Margaret Neil Cohen. Now this was a successful fruit importer, this company. 45-year-old owner Neil was wealthy, but he was a very modest guy. He had saved over £2 million. He could afford a very expensive house, but instead he and his wife Nancy were living with also could afford a very fancy car, but he drove an 8-year-old Ford Escort to work every single day. Neil and Nancy had recently started their family. Their oldest child was 18 months old, and then they had a newborn baby. His employees knew Neil as a very easygoing kind of guy and boss. Most of them considered him a friend and described him as a happy-go-lucky kind of guy. So Ken decided to go apply for his company. He was an ex-convict, but Neil still gave him a chance. Apparently, he served his time for tax evasion, so it wasn't like he was a violent criminal. He also believed that Neil believed that every man deserved a second chance at life. So he offered Ken a job as a driver. Ken was a hard worker and quickly gained the trust of Neil, the boss. And after working for the company for 6 months, Ken went to his boss with a proposal. Ken said that he had a few investors down in the Salisbury area near Stonehenge, and that they were interested in buying his company. They were offering between 3 and 4.5 million pounds at the time. The investors, though, were just in his head, and his story was just a plan to take over the company and use it for smuggling drugs again. He wanted his drug empire at any cost. Now let's go back to Belinda, Ken's crush. She hadn't contacted him during his 3 years in prison, but he was still obsessed with the lady. In the current times, she had, sold her home in Chelsea, London, and moved to a large country state in Devon. Ken visited her and took notice of her amazing ranch. He advised her to make some improvements, cut down some trees, build a nice secure wall with electric gates, and put in some drainage for the muddy roads in the property. She thought it was weird that he was offering solutions to problems she didn't see, but she didn't think much of it. In early February, Ken drove to see Belinda and told her he had some news. He explained he was taking over Siva Freight and offered her 72 days a week. So she quickly agreed. Neil initially wasn't interested really in selling the company, but after speaking to his wife Nancy about the prospect, the two of them agreed it might be a good idea. Nancy wanted him to retire and wanted to raise a family in India, where the schools were better than the UK. On February 13th, 2003, Neil Cohen agreed to meet Ken's associates. That Thursday morning, Neil told his employees he was driving down near Stonehenge for a meeting, and that was the last time they saw him. The following Monday, the employees of Siva Freight were called to an emergency meeting held by no other than Ken. He announced that Neil Cohen had agreed to sell the company, and Belinda Browen was the new owner. Ken also said that Neil wished them well, but Nancy was in ill health, according to him. So he decided to retire and move back to India to raise his family. He showed the employees a bill of sale for the company, signed by Neil. The employees were in shock, but they knew that if they wanted to keep their jobs, they needed to work. The very next day, Belinda was driving to her new job at Siva Freight. She was feeling sick and turned around to go back home. When she got to her property, she found two guys with an older model Jaguar and digging equipment. The guys had a backhoe and they were digging a large trench on one of the roads on her property. She was so mad that she stopped the car and confronted the man. She didn't agree to any work to be done in her property, but the man explained that Ken had sent them to put in a drainage pipe and gravel over the road. Belinda was not having it, but Ken convinced her that this was going to be better for the drainage. Now 12,000 miles away in New Zealand, Nancy Cohen's older brother, Onkar Verma, was getting worried. sister and his mother, but there was no reply. Panicking, Onkar called Siva Freight and spoke to the manager, Mike Barr. He told him that Neil and his family had sold the company and moved back to India. But Onkar knew that wasn't true. Nancy and Neil would never do that without telling him. He knew that something was horribly wrong. So, Barr even faxed Onkar a power of attorney document signed by Neil, and that made him even more nervous because Neil's signature wasn't really Neil's signature. On February 19, Onkar emailed Scotland Yard to explain his worries, and they referred him to the missing persons unit. He told them, quote, "I spoke to Nancy every day. There's never been a day when we did not speak. My sister rang me twice a day. My mom also, and every day I would ring them once. All of a sudden, there's no calls. No call to say we're okay and we're going to India." London police told him they stopped by and did a welfare check, but the house was empty. Neighbors and friends confirmed that they moved to India. But Nancy's brother decided to book a flight and go to London on March 5th. He got a key to the family home and went to check it out for himself. He said that the clothes were still in the washing machine. The children's toys were on the floor. They had a cooked meal in the fridge. He was worried this didn't seem like a family who just decided to move. When they let me go back, because Neil had been in jail for tax evasion in the past, as I mentioned before. Onkar, Nancy's brother, believed that he was probably hiding because not wanting to pay some taxes. He believed that police stereotyped him and believed that he was a runner because he was in trouble. Eventually, he convinced the police to transfer the case to the Serious Crimes Group. He explained that his mother's most precious possession, her prayer book, was still in the house, and that she went nowhere without it. The first person detectives interviewed was the last person to see Neil Cohen. himself into financial trouble, and that his only other choice was to flee back to India. But investigators were skeptical of this story, and they began to investigate him instead. Now, Neil had a conviction. He did time for tax evasion, but our friend Ken was also an ex-convict, and for other things that they were a lot more interesting to the police. So they decided to start an investigation on Ken. They found a lot of things in his phone records. Cell phone location tracking showed that Neil left his home and drove toward Stonehenge on February 13. Now, Ken lived nearby in Wilton, and police could see that his phone met with Neil's phone in Stonehenge. And then together they traveled further south. Now, the police knew that Belinda was the new manager of the company, and Ken and Neil's phone travel near her home. So police decided to question Belinda. Belinda agreed to meet them, but Ken was furious with her. He didn't want the police going into her property. He asked her to call them back and say that they would meet somewhere else. Belinda did not understand why he would want her to do that, but she didn't need to call them after all. Ken always had a plan. The police received a lead on the whereabouts of Neil. It came from an associate of Ken, William. Now, William and Ken had stolen passports together years ago, and Ken had testified against him, landing him in prison. So at the direction of Ken, William called the detectives. He said that he knew Neil Cohen and that he was still in the UK because he and Ken had plans to meet with him in the following week in Newport, Wales. He said that Neil was hiding and that he wanted to buy 5 passports from him. So the police decided to wait on going to Belinda's house and went to this location where they were supposed to meet with Neil to buy the passports. showed up with the same backhoe. She took her kids to town for today while the men were working on her property. The following Monday, detectives watched the friends William and Ken standing near a bronze statue of a pig in Newport. That was the meeting point for the sale of the passports. But Ken received a phone call, apparently saying that they were not going to meet. And because, according to Ken, this person that called was feeling like they were being tricked. On April 22nd, detectives again wanted to interview Belinda and drove to her home. They asked her if she noticed anything odd about Ken's behavior in the last few days. She said that when she told him that police wanted to interview her, he said something like, if they ask what I was doing on your land, just tell them I was helping you with your water system. So detectives were curious, and now they really wanted to know what he was doing on her land. She explained that he had dug a drainage ditch, and they knew what that meant. So they started to dig up Belinda's property. Later that afternoon, a father and son were spending the evening on a kayak trip off the coast, and they noticed something floating in the ocean. As they got closer, they could tell it was a body. They alerted the police. And it took about, I think, 3 hours for the police to arrive. In the meantime, the father and the son waited by the body in the dark ocean. The body had suffered severe blunt trauma to the back of the head. Packing tape was still wrapped tightly around the head and jaw. 1 week after they found it, they identified it as Neil Cohen's body. Cause of death, blunt force trauma and suffocation. Police knew at that point that his family was probably already dead too. The evidence suggested that his body was buried in the ground and exhumed at a later date, transported to a boat, and then dumped into the water. Detectives brought in forensic archaeologists and pathologists to dig through the area of the drainage ditch on Belinda's property. They spent 5 days and couldn't find anything, but they needed to continue the search. Eventually, they recovered jewelry that belonged to Nancy, baby clothes, and evidence of a large bonfire. Still no bodies, but detectives assume that they had buried the entire family there at one time. They continued to go through the phone location of the family when they went missing. They show that when they met at Stonehenge, there were 2 additional phones traveling the same route. William's phone and Peter Reese, another career criminal. All 3 suspects at the time were on the run. Ken and William had fled into mainland Europe, while Peter Reese was alone. And apparently he was hiding in the UK. Peter Reese had checked into a boarding house, apparently, and he was feeling very bad about what happened. He even talked to this lady at the boarding house and explained that the police wanted him for murder, but that he didn't do it. He told this lady that Ken was the one that killed all 5 of them. So the woman called the police, and Reese spent 3 days running from police, but later on was arrested in a pub. He refused to say anything. But a month after he was arrested, a second body was found by a fisherman floating off the coast of Isle of Wight. I'm not sure if that's a correct pronunciation. But autopsy confirmed that this was Nancy's body. Ken was still on the run, and at this point he was in Belgium. But the police tracked him down and sent him to the UK. William was still in hiding, but he got tired and returned to the UK and turned himself in. A week after that, Nancy's mother, Charnjit Kaur's body, washed up on the Isle of Wight. Detectives collected evidence from the movements of the phones, and even all kinds of physical evidence that they could gather. I mean, just by the phones, the 4 of them traveling together. And even showed them arriving at Ken's place, the one that he shared with his father. Apparently they kept Neil alive for 3 days. William's son provided a Lexmark color printer and a gray suitcase to the police. The suitcase contained 10 blank sheets of computer paper with Neil's signature on them. Apparently, they made him sign several sheets because they wanted to print documents for the company they were going to take over. The movements of the phones also show that on February 15, Ken and William traveled back because while he was held captive, he managed to find a letter in the house where he was being held. So he carefully folded and tucked the letter into his right sock. It was damaged because of being buried, but then dumped in the ocean. But the letter remained in his sock. The letter was from Cheltenham and Gloucester Building Society, addressed to Mr. K.R. Reagan and Mr. R.F. Avery. The date on the letter was February 22nd, 2003, the day before he was abducted. Neil knew that he was going to be murdered, so he wanted to leave something behind to incriminate who killed him. The trial began November 8th, 2004, and lasted 9 months. It costed over £10 million. Prosecutor presented almost 4,500 exhibits of evidence, but all 3 suspects pleaded not guilty and claimed to be falsely accusated. Peter Rees was convicted of Neil's murder, but cleared of the other 4 murders and received 23 years in prison. The other 2 were both sentenced to 5 consecutive life sentences without the possibility of parole. The bodies of 18-month-old Devender and 8-week-old Ravender were never found. Years later, in the year 2016, police linked Ken and Mr. Hornsey to the death of Michael Scalamack from Southampton. Michael went missing in 1992. His family was told that he ran off to Europe and Nigeria with an unknown woman. The family received a handwritten letter from someone, allegedly calling herself Helen, saying that the 2 of them had been living together in Europe. However, the last person to ever see Michael was Kenneth Reagan. Now, when I learned about this story, it baffles me, the idea that with all this piles and piles of evidence, they still want to, claim that they're innocent, which, again, it really is crazy to me. But one of the things that it kind of becomes normal is this kind of crimes. Once you are inside some kind of a criminal organization or criminal niche that some people find themselves in for the love of power and for the love of money, I guess. For whatever reason, some people believe that there's only one way and one way only to live. And in this case, was making money. It was kind of the trigger for this guy to take over his life and take over his company and profit from it. He didn't put in the work to start the company. He didn't live in a tiny house to save money and invest in his company, but he wanted to reap the benefits of what Neil was doing in the first place. It's crazy to think that this guy, after giving all those names and helping the police, that he was still free. And that this drug mafia was not interested in trying to find him and getting rid of him for what he did. Not that he deserved it. Of course, nobody deserves that, but, the justice system, in order to find bigger fish, just enabled this guy to keep committing crimes and basically get rid of an entire family that, no matter what, were working hard to live the way they wanted to live. Such a terrible case, such a sad story, but I hope I was able to share it with you in a way that it was understandable. There were too many people involved, so sometimes it's hard to follow. But I hope it was clear enough to help us understand the story. A different kind of story, but still a true crime story. Thanks for the support, guys. I truly appreciate you being here today and always. I'll talk to you guys next time.